All right. Christy's with us. Larry's with us. Tom, Jerry, Sheriff, Jason McIntosh. Is Jason coming on, Sheriff?
No.
Okay. Leanne, I see Mark's here. Are you in for Leanne, Mark?
I think Leanne's trying to get on. There's been email issues with the county, so she's going to try to hop on.
Okay. Mike Young, is Mike on? Looks like Mike might have just gone on. Joan and Jenny and Pat, I saw you guys. Doug Primo said he couldn't make it, and Matt Morrow, I saw you too, right?
Right.
So, okay. So we're just missing Jason, Leanne, and Mike Young, which I think I might have just let Mike Young in.
I'm in.
Okay, there's Mike. Hey, you made it. Wow, you must have driven fast to make it all the way home.
My appointment got canceled. I've been doing other work.
Okay. Well, it's 4 after, so why don't we get started? This is meeting 2, and Christy, I'll turn it over to you to kick us off, okay?
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Sheriff and the Undersheriff, for pulling together the materials that we were able to send out yesterday to folks. What I'm going to do is spend a few minutes up front just going over where we're focusing in our energies. So I want to do a bit of a check-in around the room to see how people are starting today. And I'm going to use one word to describe how you come into this meeting. Then I want to talk a little bit about ground rules, because now we're starting to get into some of the specifics, and I want to make sure we're all on the same page about respectful dialogue. And I want to talk a little bit and just make sure that we're always tying back to our real purpose in being here. So I'll show you the goals. And again, they haven't changed. They're what we talked about in the initial session. And then I'm going to break you up in a couple of ways. And we're going to talk about, based on the materials that we received and their key focus areas, I'm going to have you break up into some small groups first, and then we'll do some larger group discussion to talk about what are the strengths of the current practices and where are the opportunities to really leverage and move more and more in the direction of some potential growth, potential partnerships. What are the things that we would need to discuss there? And then in our next session, and want to, at the end of this one, talk about what are our planning and our recommendations and how we're going to get public input on wherever we get to in these couple of meetings. Okay. So my job during this is to make sure that we keep a good space to ask questions that keep us constructive, and to keep on some kind of a timeline as we move through the information. Okay. Any questions so far? Very good. Okay. And if you do have questions, my ask is that you unmute yourself as long as nobody else is talking, and please raise them. Ryan will help me in this to make sure that I'm able to sort of see everything. I'm sharing the screens, but sometimes things get missed. So thank you, Ryan, for supporting to make sure that I don't miss somebody if you've got something to raise. Okay. So let's start with the check-in. I'd like to just go around and give everybody a chance to use one word to describe how you're coming into today's session. And that might be about how you're feeling about the materials. It might be about whether you're distracted from whatever you've just come to, or just general feeling. So one word to describe how you're starting today's session. And Ryan, if I'd ask you to do that by roll call, if you don't mind, I'd appreciate it, which means be ready, folks.
Sure. I'll start with myself. I guess I'm feeling ready. Let's do this. Let's get it going. Pat Freilich.
I think I'm hopeful.
Very good. Matt Morrow.
I'm tired.
Mark.
I hope to be helpful.
Very good. Joan. Joan, you're on mute if you're trying to talk.
I don't think she's in her office.
Okay. Jenny.
Curious.
Larry.
Positive attitude, hoping to we accomplish something.
Jerry King.
Positive also.
Tom?
Positive, fed up with COVID.
Here, here. Mike?
Interesting.
Sheriff?
No comment.
Okay. There you are, Christy.
Thank you. And I think that that's a good start. I mean, part of where we're going with this is to have an open and honest dialogue. We're all humans in this. Yes, there are lots of external complicating factors. So I appreciate you being willing to spend a couple of hours with us this afternoon. My commitment to you is that we will use between now with a hard stop at 5:30 in terms of your own planning. During that time, I'll also want us to be able to take a few minutes break for all kinds of reasons. So know that you're also going to have that if you're trying to sort of plan. And I'm shooting for about 4:20-ish that we'll have a 10 to 15 minute break. Okay. All right. So let's go. So just as a reminder of where we're trying to get to, the goals of the policing reinvention and collaboration is for us to look at ways to encourage and increase promoting public safety, improving community engagement, and fostering even more trust. So this doesn't assume that things are below the surface. It says, what can we do to get better and better at where we're going? And so some of the commentary and what the foundation that we talked about last time was about trust coming through transparency. So people understanding more about and having opportunities to contribute, like what we're doing in terms of understanding the approaches to policing that we currently take. And then legitimizing what's already good, right? Where is the policing working for us? How can we capitalize on current efficiencies and address what needs modernizing? So as one of the comments that came out of the last session, there may be things that policing needs more of that we can be supportive of. That piece of the conversation in terms of opportunities, there's certainly an invitation to consider that. And the safeguarding of fairness is looking at where it is that the objectivity and the liability for both the police department and for the county is looked at in terms of how we're approaching things. Partnerships can come into that as well to sort of make sure that the resource distribution is done in ways that allows everybody to do their job the best possible way we can. So as we go through, what we'll be looking at, again, those goals, the public safety promotion, the improvement of community engagement, and the fostering of trust are the markers that we'll use as our guideposts. Okay? And so just as a reminder of where we are, we've had one meeting, and in that meeting, we looked at the various kind of key block areas that we could look at. And what we came to was 3 key topics that we're going to focus in on. That's what the sample materials that our Sheriff's Department have put together are to give us some reference points and some stories, some current policies, to give us something to sort of to gnaw on, to look at specifics of where things are going. And so today and in our meeting 3, so that's what we've targeted is 2 meetings for this discussion. I'll take us as far as I can today with your good faith and good fortune and good approach. And so what we want to look at is to review and discuss, at least today, where those policies land for us in terms of public safety, engagement, and trust. And are there measures that around the things that we might see where some improvement or further collaboration, for instance, could be helpful? How would we measure some of those things? We may or may not get to the measures of success today, but that is one of our objectives in meetings 2 and 3 to get to. And then out of that, we'll develop then a plan that we have to identify then how we're going to share what we propose with the public. And what does that look like? And so as a group, we're going to make some decisions around what that is too. That probably won't be today. That will be in our next meeting. Okay? And then the final piece is once that whatever version of public review has been done, we'll come back and look at any commentary that's there. Does it require us to make any adjustments before we send it back to the Board of Legislators, which is the required path for their final approvals and submission back to the state. Okay, any questions about where we are? Everybody's good? Okay, and I can only see a few head nods, so you'll have to speak up if you don't agree. Thank you. Jerry, I saw yours, it was loud and clear, thank you. Okay, so ground rules for today, and this is just, I hope that what I'm really talking about here is speaking to the choir, but sometimes it's better just to confirm those things. So you can see that the first two have a key theme, and that is about our goal today is to be listening to one another. We don't always have to agree. I don't expect that we're always going to agree. But the idea is that when somebody's talking, that's where we're focused our energy on. We ask you to keep your commentary to a reasonable length because we've got about a dozen people on the call, and we want to make sure that everybody gets a chance to have a space for some discussion. You will be in breakout rooms. I will ask you to use your own measures to make sure that we're adhering to these principles in those, in the roles and responsibilities that you have in your current work. I probably don't need to say more than that, but that's the expectation. Will be okay to be criticized, but what we're talking about is not making this personal. We're talking about ideas. If you don't agree with something, looking at it from that perspective, this is not about finger pointing at people. That's not where we're going. That's not how I approach things, and that I will cut you off on. Comments, the idea with comments is not to convince other people, but it's to share information or another perspective. That's why you're on the call. You all care and have input and value in relation to things that relate to policing. And so we need to be able to hear people's different perspectives, but it's not about speaking louder. That's not how you're quote going to win this one. That's not how this works. And so allowing everybody a chance to speak, part of that will be you measuring your own length of commentary, but I'll also do that if I need to. And again, anything we want to, if your emotions get the better of you, give yourself a breath before you decide to share any comments with us, because we're going to get farther if we speak in those terms than if I have to spend a lot of time playing referee. Okay. All right. So here's what we're going to be focused in on. You received a whack of materials and got a chance, I hope, to have a look through the things that were included, and that included both some policy pieces as well as some stories and some examples of the ways in which those have been put into play or might have implications. And so where we're going to focus our energy today is really on identifying what are some of the successes and what are some potential opportunities for improvement that are going to promote these things at the bottom. So there's those goals again, okay? And so what we are going to be looking at in two forms, when I send you out into breakout rooms first, what I'm going to ask you to do is give your general comments about what you saw in terms of the package, any themes or threads that you saw that were strengths, any themes or threads that you saw as potential opportunities. We'll report back into the group from each of your breakout rooms what you saw, and then we'll break more specifically as needed into some of our particular pieces. Just as a reminder, the 3 topics we decided that were going to be our particular key areas of focus. One was the mental health, substance abuse, and homelessness. Another was looking at SOPs, and particularly the things mentioned there, incidents, processes, safety of the officers and the public, and how incidents are managed were some potential areas. And then the other piece that we decided we were going to focus in on was about training and looking at that in terms of what's provided, what's needed, and whether there are any opportunities there. And of course, both the standard operating procedures and the training may or may not be related to this topic of mental health, substance abuse, and homelessness. Any questions so far? Everybody good? Okay. So what we're going to do, and just to confirm everybody did get the package at some point yesterday, I'm trusting I will not be putting up certainly all of those materials on the slides. So if you need to get them out for your own reference, now would be a good time. But as I say, what I'm going to ask you to do is give your general impressions in the small group that you're in. So my suggestion is that you somehow record or keep note of these questions. And in your discussion, you're going to have 15 minutes in your group. You're going to have about 3 people in your group. And what you're going to do is first talk about what works about the current processes based on what you read. What's working? And it's really important that you start there. And I need you to trust me on that. If you don't know why we're going there, just trust me. I need us to start from the place of what did you notice that's working about those processes, either from what you read or from your own understanding and perspective in terms of being your partnerships potentially. What's working? General terms, and then in keeping with our goals of promoting public safety, improving engagement, and fostering trust, what might be a potential opportunity of growth based on your experience and what you saw? Everybody clear? Those are your 2 questions. It will be 3:49 by the time you get in your group. I'm going to give you 15 minutes. There will be about 3 people in your group. If you do the math on that, everybody's going to have about 5 minutes to give their responses to those 2 questions. Manage it how you like. I will send you a reminder in there when you're about 5 minutes from the end. Certainly by then, at least 2 of the people should have spoken. And so if you haven't gotten to the 3rd person, then they'll get their chance. But my suggestion is everybody get a chance at round 1 and then everybody do round 2. What works? What might be opportunities for growth? Okay.
Okay,
Ryan, are you going to send us into the random groupings?
I'm gonna try.
Okay. And so I will not be in a grouping. I may pop in. I'm not going to offer any commentary, but if you need me, there's a space for you to put up your hand and I'll be able to watch because I'm co-hosting and I can come in if you need me. Give yourself a few minutes to say you've got 50.
You want 3 per room?
Yes, ideally, yes. If we can close to that.
Okay, good. I got 1. I'm gonna do,
So for anybody who's not familiar with breakout rooms, it will come up on your screen and it'll say you will be going into breakout room number 2, and it'll just take you there. At the end of the 15-minute window, what will happen is it'll give you a warning to say this window's going to close and it's going to bounce you back here. So you really don't have to do anything except participate in the discussion. So make sure you have those questions. My ask is that as of your groups is that you identify somebody who's going to record some notes because we're going to ask for a report back in when we get back together in 15. Okay. What works? What might be opportunities?
I think I did it. Open all rooms.
Looks great. Ready, everybody? There you
Broadcast
go.
you all.
Okay.
Okay, I didn't put myself in a room.
You can just go to you can join any of them.
Okay.
So maybe go to the first one by the,
Yeah, I didn't do it in any particular order. I just went.
that's fine. Maybe go to 3.
Okay.
Right? Thanks, Ryan.
Move to. Oh wait, I gotta go in myself.
You just click the join button. Thanks.
Christy, I think I'm still in this room, but I'm not technically participating. I was just on for tech
That's
support
okay.
in case.
That's
So
good. That's just fine, Connor. Thank you so much.
no problem. Yeah, and I'm not sure. Do you happen to know whose Zoom account it was that set this up?
It would have been Ryan or whoever sets up for Ryan.
Okay. All right. Good to know.
Yeah. So it, yeah, because I didn't set it up because I knew you had to do something with it, right? So.
Yeah. Okay. No problem.
Okay.
I'm gonna go back on mute and I'll be in the
Awesome.
background.
Okay. Thanks so much, Ryan.
No problem.
Connor, thank you.
No problem.
Welcome back. We'll just wait for the rest of our group to join us.
So Christy, I just want to tell you that I was on another meeting earlier today, not through Zoom, with
Yeah.
breakout rooms, and the Zoom breakout rooms work so much better.
That is good to hear. That's the right kind of information, Joan.
Yeah, yeah. You know, there was a delay for each person to get into a room. It was terrible.
Yeah. I was in one with people around the world the other day on Zoom, and we did 3 breakouts in 1 hour with 500 people. It was
Wow.
amazing. And I thought, I have more and more confidence. So that's good to hear that you
Yeah.
had a good, you know,
Zoom is much
appreciate
better
the
than
difference.
the other one.
Yeah.
I just got bounced out of my room.
What's that?
Oh, Sheriff.
Stick with us.
Don't worry, I won't be participating much longer, but I just wanted to say I got bounced out of the room. I can't find everybody.
Well, this is where we wanted you anyway. So this is good. This is
You're
good.
back.
We're back. Okay. How are we doing? Have we got everybody? The whole room, if you didn't close yourself out, everybody will be back here in 1 minute. So hopefully, let me just see. We're almost got everybody back.
I think everybody's back.
Perfect. Okay. So let me go back to a regular view. So what I'd like to do is just spend a few minutes and, sorry, go ahead. We're good?
Yeah, I guess
Um,
you'll have to Zoom this one.
You might want to mute yourself if you haven't already. And what we'll do is we'll ask one person from each of the 3 groups to, we'll start off by going, each group identify one thing that's working based on what you read. And we'll exhaust that, and then we'll move into some potential growth areas. I'm going to do my best to try to keep some notes, but I may need yours as well. So can we have somebody from group number 1 tell us one thing that you talked about in terms of something that's working?
Sure. This is Pat, and
Hi,
I
Pat.
guess our group felt that the policies that we were given to review that were thorough, that it was good to know that the staff were reviewing them, having to sign off on them. The questions that we couldn't answer, however, is there any associated trainings, like say, for example, hands-on trainings, or is there any ongoing review of the policies so that the staff are now updated and are, that there's an opportunity to present that in a hands-on way. Joan or Tom, did you have anything to add?
No, that covers it.
All right.
Updates. So when there is an update, is there a practice around
Yeah.
the trainings updates? So. trainings. Okay. Great.
Group 2 is Jenny, Larry, Sheriff, and Mike Young.
So what's working? What's one thing that you came up with? What's working? Group 2.
This is Jenny. We spent a bit of time on the investigating child abuse one because that's my expertise area with the
Yeah.
sheriff. And, we identified it's comprehensive, how to talk to kids, how to talk to families, that there was a good job. And a lot of times they're the first responder that's then making a referral to us in Child Protective Services. And then we started looking at the taser deployment one a little bit. And Larry and Mike, you can jump in.
What did you see in terms of what's working on the taser one then?
What's that, Christy?
What did you find that's working on the taser policy?
We didn't get that far.
We
Okay.
ran out of time, basically.
All right, we can come back to it. any initial, anything else that your group talked about in terms of what's working that you want to bring up?
Just back on the subject of child abuse, it seems that the team effort that we have in place is working fairly well. There's a few verbiage changes that need to be made in the policy, but then Mike told us that this is not the latest policy and that he has an updated one that he'll share with us so we can see if the language has been updated in the current one.
Okay, that's great. Okay, awesome. Group 3. What did you
Gary,
come
Mark, and Matt.
in terms of what's working?
We spent the majority of our time talking about the drug task force information, and the people in our group thought that that was really helpful. It was a great narrative and a lot of data involved. They included some scenarios and press releases, and it's just a good way of getting a lot of information out there. It's a good example of buy-in from other agencies. It's a good way to get the local government on board with knowing what's going on at the office, and that's the majority of our time was spent talking about that.
Okay. Agencies, local government. Okay, that's awesome. So what I've heard so far in terms of what's working is that that there's an impression that the policies are thorough, that staff are reviewing and signing off on them so that there's a process there as well. On the investigating child abuse, that it was comprehensive, particularly in how to talk to families, and that you can see that there's a team effort and work that's working fairly well, and that there may be in the updated policy, so there's one forthcoming for us, some changes in the language that might address things subtly differently in terms of the verbiage. And on the drug task force, that it was really a helpful way to sort of express those things. And it's a great narrative in the data. And the point from the group that Matt was in was it's a great way to show other agencies and the local government as a potential for buy-in to really understand what are some of those things through what was shared in that report. And one of the first potential areas of growth that came out of Group 1's discussion was wondering around any hands-on training that might be happening around some of the policies, and also looking at when there are updates in policies, does that also mean there's an update in training? Did I capture so far what people have said? And did I miss anything? Okay, so let's go on to your general impressions in terms of where some of the potential areas of growth. And again, let's start with group number 1.
All right. So we discussed the potential opportunity of getting more information, and it really kind of took us back to questions that we didn't necessarily know the answer to, is whether or not the Sheriff's Department participates in any de-escalation training past what they initially get as they enter their career. Because we really kind of thought that if it wasn't, that would be an opportunity to be able to address the focus areas, and especially with the mental health, substance abuse, and homeless population. Let's see. Oh, and then the second thing that we, again, not knowing if it exists already, is there an internal process when the Sheriff's Department is experiencing like a critical incident or an unusual incident, or someone has made a charge or a complaint against personnel. And then if that isn't in existence going forward, it might be an opportunity for us to manage how we're addressing whatever the outcome of all these meetings are.
Okay. Thank you. I also appreciate the sensitivity within the way in which you said that. Thank you. It's a nice role modeling to get us started.
Christy, can I just add one thing
Sure.
to our group 1 that we also
Yeah.
talked about is looking at the data sheet from the crime report from 2015 through 2019. And we see that, and this might be something that the state, how the state breaks it down, and that's why the reporting is that way. But we thought it was interesting that it's broken down to violent crimes and property crimes. And we thought it might be interesting to know, even if it's not something that gets reported to the state, but if our DA's office and our probation office and our law enforcement offices, if they break down any further to describe any of those crime areas that involved people with mental health issues, homeless issues, substance abuse issues, so that we know in the community where some of that might fall. And I may not be expressing it well, but that's, we just started that discussion towards the end of the session.
Okay. Was there something around that you wanted to add? Somebody else spoke up there and I just didn't.
I just was thanking Joan for remembering that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for thanking. Okay, group number 2. Other areas or potential for growth opportunities that you thought of as a result of what you reviewed?
Jenny, Larry, Sheriff, and Mike Young.
Well, I think Jenny talked about adding the Child Advocacy Center to the policy, that's become a new partner to use, and that's very active, and the sheriff seemed to agree. And I thought that was an important point to be made.
Okay, so adding the Child Advocacy Center as a new partner to the policy, Mike, that's what you're.
I think just acknowledging that that's
It's there.
a resource that the sheriff's department has.
Okay.
And I think that resource really shows the combined efforts of multiple agencies, just like the Drug Task Force that Matt and Mark talked about in their group, and also helps us direct training opportunities for everyone.
Great. Thank you. Other things that you might have come up with in group 2? Have we covered it?
I think that pretty much covers it. I'm not sure we ended up that as I mentioned earlier, we didn't have the latest policy updates, and I wasn't clear if this Child Advocacy Center was included in the updated policy or not. So I guess.
So something to look at. That's great. Okay, group 3. What opportunities did you see?
We, again, because everybody was so impressed with the Drug Task Force documents, we talked about maybe that it would be an opportunity to improve and expand on the rec patrol if that part of the sheriff's department was reported on in the same way. Maybe you would get some more buy-in from the legislators if they had a little more detail and information about what the rec patrol does. And then right at the very end, someone in our group brought up that they'd like to see some more opportunities for some youth development in the county. We didn't really get to touch on how that would relate to the sheriff's department or anything.
Okay. My naivety is going to show here for a minute. Matt, when you say rec patrol, is that short for something?
Recreation.
Okay, so it is.
Patrol.
Okay.
that was the one that we talked about, but I mean, I think the general consensus was maybe even, some more information about, standard road patrol and stuff too. Everyone was just a big fan of the drug task force report.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
And I guess the only other thing is how they put it together, the village and other small groups and stuff like that, what they've accomplished as far as what you can accomplish by working together. And, the village has an investment in it. They pay somebody and, we're kind of limited and this and that. So by doing what they did, they put a real good force together and you can see where they're making progress.
Is this relation, Jerry, to the drug task force, that piece of the report, or something else? Okay.
The drug task force report.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. So, I mean, as it goes on, we may get more buy-in from other people and stuff like that. And the other thing is with that information, you can also go to your constituents and try to justify some of this stuff if you decide to make improvements or add more to it. That's all I had.
Okay, let me tell you what I've got, and my apologies. That's one of the things with this process. I'll speak them, but in terms of sharing them with you, that'll be something I'll send to you after we've done today to make sure that I've captured it correctly. But what I've heard so far, in terms of generally for some potential areas of growth, besides about hands-on training and any implications for training when policies are updated, is there a process for that? But the other piece was wondering about more information on participation in de-escalation training after that onboarding has happened, and particularly about addressing things in the mental health, substance abuse, and homelessness areas. There's a question around, is there a process around critical incident complaints? And is there or not, if there isn't, or is there an opportunity to either address or further address that? We talked about the information that comes out of the data crime sheet report. And while it focuses in on violent crimes and property crimes, there's interest to know from the DA, probation, or other law enforcement whether we could break it down any further. For instance, could we be describing the mental health, substance abuse, or homelessness to help those groups understand better from each of their perspectives? And so while it may not be required at a state level, is it something that could be used in partnerships for understanding or planning? And then on the Child Advocacy Center, wondering whether in the most recent updated policy, which we want to look at, that the Child Advocacy Center is another really good example of a partnerships and showing that combined effort, and also in the benefit of helping direct training for everyone, much like the drug force task force grouping has done. And so using the drug force task force as a sample to improve and expand on things like recreation patrol and or standard road patrols. If their information was shared in a similar way, it might create more buy-in potential from our local legislators. So sharing information differently might be useful. And also wondered about whether or not there are more opportunities to consider more for youth development. And finally, in looking at that drug task force, that there's a mention that the working together more can be accomplished. So we're looking at those partnerships, and as this information gets shared, it may create further buy-in. So maybe sharing it a little more widely, but also considering that there's an opportunity to make a case for further improvements with information like this. Did I capture what you've said, folks? And did I make anything, is anything wrong, or did I miss anything? Thumbs up?
I think you got it, Christy. I think
Okay.
that was a good summary. Yes.
Okay. Okay. Now, I also heard in some of your conversations that that you just got started on some things and I cut off your discussion. So here's our opportunity now. And I'd like to just talk for a couple of minutes, and then I'm going to send you to break, and then we'll decide when we come back from break, which way we're going. And so that is we now, and I want to show you with the slides and make sure that you're still able to see my slides. Can somebody give me a thumbs up, Ryan? Are you able to see me switch the slide? Great. Okay. So what I've got here is I've got the 3 slides of the areas that we had decided to focus in on. And so the opportunity that we have is to have either a full group discussion on some of these things to make sure that we're covering off based on what we see in the policies or what else we might want to talk about, the concepts under and some of the potential question areas around mental health, substance abuse, and homelessness, around some of the SOPs and looking at some specific pieces. And we were given some information around that, so we can talk a little bit more and decide whether there's anything else we need to discuss. And the question is, we could break each of the groups and have each group look at one of these, or we could talk about them as a group and have a shorter discussion, but with more people. And so give me your ideas. We'll give a couple of minutes discussion. So do you want to talk about these things as a full group? Or would you like to each group choose one and have some further discussion in your group about one of these particular 3 topic areas? Thoughts, preferences?
I think the small groups, we made quite a bit of progress. I think that's a good idea.
Okay. Others, does that make sense to you? Yeah? Okay.
I was going to say the full group, but I'll go along with the majority.
Yeah, I was going to say the whole group too, because in small groups, you're not getting everybody's ideas and opinions till after the fact. You can't see it face value for what it is. So no, I don't like the small group stuff, but if it makes it more comfortable for everybody else, so be it, but I don't like it.
Okay.
I also would prefer the larger group since we're getting into more particular discussions.
Okay. Okay. Any other thoughts or perspectives from people before we make a decision about that? Okay. So what we'll do, and let's just do it as a roll call, and we'll go with the majority, if that's all right. So what people have said is that the small group worked pretty well. We're getting into other topics now where we want to make sure that we hear everybody's opinion. So that's where the large group would lend us more. Let's decide together. So we'll do a roll call and you'll say small group or large group. Okay. Ryan, can I ask you to do that for us? Did we lose Ryan?
I think he made a visit somewhere else.
Okay. I'm gonna go ahead. Oh, his chair is empty. I couldn't see him. Okay, so let me just do that. Larry, small group or large group? Did I lose Larry too?
Zoom is so great. That's a great thing, I'll tell you.
Okay, so I'm gonna come back to Larry. Tom, small group or large group? Large. Okay. Jerry?
Large.
Okay. Mike, you Sheriff, you wanted large?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Mark?
Small.
Okay. Mike?
Small.
Small. Joan?
Large.
Jenny?
Large.
Pat?
Large.
Matt?
Full group, large.
Large. Okay. Larry, are you back with us? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we're going with the large group. We're going to take a 10-minute break. So if I could ask you, my clock would say that is at 4:40. We are going to reconvene, and we will start in and look at the policies and have a more detailed discussion to add to our strengths and potential areas, starting at 4:40.
Christy, can I ask you a favor?
Sure, you sure can.
I think if you ask the whole group, I think 5 minutes is fast enough for us adults. 5-minute break is long enough.
Does anybody want 10 minutes?
No.
All right. Everybody good with 5? Let's do 5.
Yep.
I'm good with that. So give yourself 5 minutes and I'll see you then. If you want to put your screens off or leave them on, it doesn't matter. Just
Okay, Pat,
Yep, I'm here.
Matt,
Yes.
Mark,
Here.
Joan,
Yes.
Jenny,
Yeah, I'm here.
Larry,
I'm here till my quarter runs out, I guess.
Gary,
Yes.
Tom,
Yeah.
Mike,
Yes.
Sheriff.
Yes.
Okay, we're good.
thank you. Thank you, everybody. Okay. So what we agreed was we were going to have the rest of our discussion having everybody's point of view brought in as the full group so that we can get the benefit of everybody's participation. And so we're going to look first at just the order that the sheets were in, and let's talk about the focus area of mental health, substance abuse, and homelessness. And when we were looking at sort of some of the key themes here, what we want to do is look at potentially, these are questions. We don't have to cover them all, but I just wanted to have a more general discussion based on what you saw in the policies and in the stories that help illustrate those things. Are there things that where we can see opportunities or other strengths that we want to talk about now as a collective? And I'm going to open the floor.
Well, I can start. Our group with the mental health talked briefly about the incident with the taser and the guy with the knives. That the sheriff's office provide that incident report, and we thought that the deputy involved showed great restraint and did a good job in a difficult situation. So, as a jumping off point, that was, clearly an instance where we had law enforcement responding to someone who was having a mental health crisis, and it certainly could have gone seemingly much worse, but the outcome was okay. Everybody was okay at the end of the day.
So this is Pat, and I guess to add to that, speaking to the 5 years that I've been in the position, over the course of those 5 years, even, pretty much the law enforcement has stayed the same, but there seems to be more often reports of positive outcomes when the sheriff's department or the police department has worked with local agencies with somebody that is obviously under the influence and or having a mental health issues. So I think that's positive, and certainly something we can leverage in the future.
So you think the sheriff's office and Lavelle has a good relationship with the agencies, Pat?
Yes. The only time I hear something negative really involves the state police. Just throwing that out. I just thrown that out there.
And Patty, if I could just remind everybody at this point, which you just said, is the fact that all the sheriffs across the state of New York, all the chiefs of police across the state of New York are mandated through DCJS and their policies. As you see, with what the governor has laid out in front of everybody, the state police don't adhere to that. So thank you for what you just said.
Oh.
I guess one thing we never know, you get the call and this and that, comes through dispatch, goes to EMS and stuff. You never really hear how agitated the person may be or this or that. And going back to the knife situation, was law enforcement there first or was EMS, and would have EMS survived that situation if law enforcement wasn't there? I mean, I guess those are my questions, because I know as EMS, I'm not doing it now, but before, you run into some of the situations that potentially you could be hurt. Because you can't control the person, you don't want to control the person. So I'm not saying it's always the sheriff department or somebody should be there. Maybe a better description of the call through dispatch, understanding.
That's probably a good question, Jerry, right? The call comes into the sheriff's dispatch at 911. So are dispatchers the ones who determine who responds to calls? I assume, right?
Well,
we don't know all the information, I guess, about that.
I think it's some of the policies, whatever the sheriff wants like that, but on the same aspect, we don't know how agitated they are. I mean, they could be just off the
Let me
super
correct
edge.
in that for a second.
Do what, Sheriff?
Let me, yeah, so what the question is you're asking is that, does the dispatcher know how elevated the person is? Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah.
So when 911 dispatches a call, again, they don't get to pick and choose who goes there. That's to the closest car. So whether it's a state trooper car, whether it's a county car, whether it's a village car, within inside the village, that is. When that dispatcher call comes in, yes, it is a dispatcher that tells us, and we have a code for that of the elevation of what that person is at, that we relay between car to car and officer to officer and dispatch. So yes, that is through the initial call does come through dispatch and sets that tone for us until we arrive on scene and analyze what we have there.
So like what Jerry's saying, say if, because in the scenario that you guys, provided, the guy that ended up getting arrested punched the guy first. Let's say, the injuries were worse and, dispatched at the same time, EMS and law enforcement. Obviously it was a dangerous situation when law enforcement got there. I think if I can, maybe what Jerry's saying is, what if EMS had got there first, and how do you know, who's going to get there first? Well, that's right, Jerry.
And that was pretty much it. But do you want police to respond to mental health calls? I mean, that's the question. Do we or don't?
That's the whole thing, Jerry. According to the governor in his manual here, yes, he wants social services people to respond first. If you read this like I have, and you get into it, you'll see that he's saying that what he wants is he wants you to send social services people first. And I think, Jenny, can you back me up a little bit on that from reading that? If you've seen it, am I correct in saying that?
You are. I guess my thought, though, was related to the triage method around this, because certainly I think, my APS workers have been out with people that are very mentally ill, but the presenting problem isn't dangerous to others. It's danger kind of to self. They're not eating, they're ruminating, they're hoarding, they're messing up their prescriptions. It kind of, what is the presenting problem? And I certainly want to point out, sometimes my crew's been out there and then we've had to call in law enforcement, for our safety. But the call came to us first, and try to do an assessment. So I guess if they're calling 911, it seems to be a very exigent circumstance around that behavior display of the person with mental illness. They have weapons, they have whatever their behavior is. They're very dangerous to others at that time. But there's certainly other people with mental health issues that aren't dangerous to others.
And I can't imagine, and Sheriff and Jenny can, support this or not, is that when I think of what gets communicated on the phone to 911, that's always going to be influenced by who's reporting the information, how the person is presenting at that moment, which can change in a millisecond. So like, say, for example, at the time of the call, it seems like this should be appropriate. That person gets on the scene and the situation has either escalated or de-escalated. And again, many things that present as a psychiatric condition are actually substance use induced, and vice versa. The other thing that's going to be like a case by case is, say, for example, when we had the synthetic drugs that were messing everybody up. So you suddenly had somebody under the influence was extremely violent. So that adds a whole nother layer. And again, who responds? What are the qualifications of that person? You know, is it a volunteer fireman versus, you know, somebody that's had CIT training? There's just so many things that could influence what was told and what ended up happening.
No offense to you, Pat, directly, or you know, sometimes we get out there and we, you know, how crazy is too crazy, right? You have the right to be mentally ill.
Yep.
Does that mean you're a danger to yourself or others? That sometimes that call is, like you said, it's a fine line and it can flip in a minute.
Oh my God, yes. It's very subjective.
We lost our facilitator temporarily, folks. So good job keeping it going.
It's I think to Mike's point about and Pat's working together, I remember particularly one specific case where there's pretty significant mental illness, and how the people were living was just uninhabitable and lots of issues. And we ended up getting a pickup order established, and he's now one of your investigators, but he came out to the house, and I remember him sitting on the floor with the person that needed to go to Samaritan. It was very obvious, and he sat on the floor and held her hands, and he looked at her and he said, "You're going to be okay." And he calmed her down so much, and he held her hand all the way to the car. I'm almost crying thinking about it again, you know. It was like the perfect, how you want them all to go.
So I guess the you know, the problem with the mental health dispatching is, I think Pat nailed it with, you know, you don't know what you're going to get into till you get there. So how do you dispatch, you know, appropriately? That's I think that's a problem. And I don't think it doesn't even sound like that big of a problem in Lewis County. It sounds like we do dispatch appropriately. I mean, are there times where you guys, yeah.
What did you just say?
I said, it sounds like you do dispatch appropriately.
And then back it up one more time again. What did you say before that?
I don't know. Now you're making me think.
No. I
talk without thinking, Sheriff. I don't know. I think that it's a difficult problem. You don't know what you're going to get till you get there. Yeah.
No, you said, yeah, but no, it was great. You said you didn't think there was that much of a problem with it in Lewis County, right?
Yeah, probably not. No.
No, thank you. Good. Because there's not. You're right. That's great. I just wanted to hear you say it. That's all. I appreciate it.
Well, we've been
Do we know what those numbers are? Like this horrible situation here from June of 19. You know, do you have an estimate of how many per year you get of mental health calls?
I have to break that down. I don't know for sure. Off the top of my head, no.
It's a hard call. I mean, the only numbers that I can provide to you, because I did a little math, is to look at what our calls would be. Of course, can I put my hands on it? No, I can't.
Jason did send us a call log from last year that had the mental health calls. It was 127, but there were times where multiple deputies responded to the same call. So I didn't go through and eliminate, duplicates, but we did get some data on that.
Okay, cool. And that was just Sheriff's Department?
127 times a deputy responded. So it could be 3 deputies responded to one incident, but that still counts as 3.
Okay.
And I only have a supposition that I wonder if it's the same person over and over again many times.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
Yes, that's very true. It is. That's a problem you have with the mentally ill, unless they're getting the proper treatment after the police are done with them, after the social services are done with them, after their whatever doctor's assigned to them is taken care of, if they stay on their medication, and if their caseworker is able to attend to them with everything else they have going on. So yeah, usually it's usually the same person, unfortunately, several times. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So is there a breakdown in our system? Well, who knows? But it's the best we've got this time. I think it's a hell of a lot better than probably other countries, that's for sure.
Just to reiterate what the sheriff was saying in regard to the guide, I read through it as well. In regard to the mental health that the sheriff's referring to, it looks like they cite major cities substituting police for medics, nurses, drivers, crisis workers, where they give no citations for rural settings. So in cities, police may only be 30 seconds away, a minute away. I mean, in a rural setting, they could be 20, 30 minutes away. So that's a long time at a really crisis situation to be at somebody's house without any officer present. So I think that the guide it accurately cited cities, but I think the smallest was maybe Springfield or Eugene, which is 200,000. I mean, we're nothing compared to that.
And Mark, I'm glad you brought that up, because you see, once again, everybody, which I'm going to now, sorry, Mike, I'm off the page here, buddy. Here's what's going to happen. What Mark just read, like you said, has to do with larger cities. This whole reform book has to do with larger cities. He didn't take into consideration anything when it came to the rural areas of policing. He didn't. So we've been thrown into this blanket again under this blue book that we're trying to work with or adhere to. I actually, like I said before, as I told you, through the Sheriff's Association, we don't have to. This is obviously the county that has to do it. And that's where, as Mark just said, you know, the whole thing is on the guise of cities, not rural sheriff's offices. And that's why a lot of this doesn't work for us. It doesn't work what they're asking for here.
Yeah,
Sheriff, I would just follow up with you and say, we all recognize what that book is and what the emphasis in that book is. I would just disagree with you and just say that by us doing this exercise, as I said the first day we met, is that I think we're going to find that given the size of our county and the partnerships we have in our county and the policies and procedures that you guys have in place, that we have a pretty damn good system in place. That doesn't mean we can't look at it and try to see if there's rooms for improvement, and having this dialogue isn't a bad thing. So we're going to end up showing the state that we went through the exercise and that for all intents and purposes, what Lewis County has in place meets what we need in Lewis County.
Hey, Joan, you know what? I would agree with you that you're sincere maybe in what you're saying, but that's not what the governor's intent is here. So I think it's extremely disingenuous, and what makes me very angry, and I am angry, okay, because I can tell you the one with the 50 some other sheriffs in the state were upset, and your police chiefs who do go along with it are going along because they have to, because they're appointed. I think it's a great place, you're right, for Mike, as you say, you know, before for improvement, whatever, that's fine. We can do that every day, all day long, without the governor threatening to take my money, to take your money, to send a monitor to come to this office or any other officer's office. That's why we're upset as police officers when this gentleman in Albany is pushing this down for a political agenda. So if it was genuine, I'd be 100% behind it. And if you think by going along with this, that it's going to feed his ego, that he's going to leave you alone, ain't happening. And you should know that from watching the news every day with that man. He is an egotistical, maniacal, overbearing son of a gun to everybody, and doesn't keep his word. I'm not afraid to say it. You know, anyhow, look, I'll do what we can here, but I'm not make no bones about it. This is a very disingenuous effort from the governor's office.
And Mike, we understand that, but we were given a task and under the threat of losing our funding. And I think, we recognize that, but, we're all just trying to do the best job we can in a situation that's not comfortable for any of us.
Yep, I can appreciate that, Larry. I appreciate that.
And this is Jerry. I mean, the thing is, as we read this stuff and go through it, like you're saying, I mean, it doesn't necessarily we have to follow it because the practices we have right now are pretty adequate. I think the big thing is is there anything like you can see, because you're the one dealing with them a lot of times too, improve? Otherwise, the way we've been doing it, I'm totally satisfied. I don't care if the governor is or not, but we've looked at it and we accept what we're doing, that you're doing a good job and we're not going to change it. So I think what we're doing is just going through, and a lot of this stuff that I see, I support you, but when do you want the police to respond to mental health calls? It's a question, so we ask it, you are, and I assume you're going to continue. And we've met our goal on that one, I think. The big thing is whoever goes, everybody comes home safe.
Right.
So, I mean, I'm impressed the way you do it and stuff like that, the response. And yeah, we understand there's sometimes you guys are too far away to get there in a reasonable amount of time, but we've also been told to stand down, whether you're around the corner from the place or wait for law enforcement to get there. Because, I mean, I think this was before you, but you've dealt with this person. It pretty much used to take the whole sheriff department and fire department to control this person when they flipped. And
I believe I know what you're talking about. And
yeah, so we worked together in concert to make sure no one got hurt on it. So it took more than you guys, and you're trained. But I kind of hear some stories. She give you all a handful too in the past. So, I mean, that's our goal, not to have anybody hurt. And one time we picked up one, I don't know, she's climbing out a window and shot with a 22. Then all of a sudden got telling about it. Well, supposedly the husband was gone. He took off and stuff like that, but she had 6 of the biggest damn dogs I've ever seen in my life. And they liked EMTs and everybody else, and she wasn't capable of calling them off. So that's, I think, what we're trying to do. Keep the practices we got, it works. And if there's a little bit that we can improve on, that's what we need to do. It's not picking your process apart. It's trying to do what we can to please your buddy. Now, excuse me, I didn't mean that, but the governor, but also going through the process to protect our money. Right now, I mean, with some of the discussions we have, I mean, with the information even on the task force, the drug task force, it's amazing that we might not be able to fund the whole thing, but what you guys have accomplished by having the village police, the Lowville's chipping in and other people and stuff like that. So, I mean, that information is something to be proud of, what you were able to pull off with a group of people.
Okay, I'm going to stop you there just for a minute. I want to commend and thank you all for the manner in which you've been handling this piece of the discussion and for moderating yourselves and for looking at as many sides of the equation as you can and staying clear to where we're trying to get to. It's really productive and I appreciate it. I want to make sure that we have enough time in our discussion to cover the other two. So is there anything else on this mental health, substance abuse, and homelessness that you want to bring up at this point? I expect we can revisit next time a little bit more, but is there anything that anyone also wants to add before we move to the next topic?
Can I add one thing?
Sure.
We have to, in order to meet the requirements here, we have to have a metric to measure, to show improvement. One thing that came to mind is how many times we're connecting someone who's involved with law enforcement with services after the fact. So we're not going to change who gets dispatched. We kind of beat that horse. But after, when, everybody's, calm and the person's been, maybe they've been, arraigned, are they being connected with those services? Maybe that's something that the sheriff's office can keep track of, or Pat can keep track of, and we can see how many times we're making that connection. And that gives us something to, aspire towards. What percentage is getting connected to the services they need after they've had these run-ins with law enforcement. Is that a reasonable thing? Is that something we're currently keeping track of? Is it something we could keep track of? I don't know if Matt or Jenny has.
I think Mike Young might be able to help with that.
I mean, that's more, it depends on whether there's an arrest or not. I mean, once you get past, if there's an arrest and it ends up in the court system, that's what we have. We have drug court, we have probation, Mark, or Matt, I should say, things of that sort. It's the people who don't end up in the judicial system that we have to figure out how we get connections there. And that's where referrals to social services or mental health, those are the type of numbers that you'd want to see. We saw that there were well over 200 domestics calls. Not all of those end up in arrests. So we don't know where those end up if people are referred to places. I mean, and that's not always the sheriff's department's call. I mean, because as Pat and Jenny pointed out, they're not the first ones there all the time. So I mean, it's difficult to measure that, I think, to tell you the truth.
It's going to be difficult.
You have many different tentacles depending on where people end up in the system.
Right. And I think that I'm going to use the leave behind program. So if somebody had an overdose, there's some counties that will leave information behind. And of course, where we wouldn't be able to track is we would know it got left behind, but we have no ability for us to understand if that person went to Credo or did they go to NERCL. And NERCL without permission couldn't tell us one way or another. So that would be the challenge.
Can I make a suggestion for today? Why don't we make the determinations about metrics once we're really focused in a little bit more, and let's use next time as the chance to say, if this is where we are and this is our opportunity, what could we measure? But that may be something that we can look at tracking. I want to make sure that today we get a chance to talk about all three of our focus areas. So Ryan, I know you have the ultimate obligation to prepare that piece of the report, but are you okay if we hold off until meeting 3 to talk about that one?
Let's keep moving.
Okay. Is that all right with everybody? I mean, I'm not saying that we're not open to ideas. It's just, I think we could spend the rest of our time doing that one, and this is where the complexities will come into play. So let's make some time for that next time. Okay. All right. Let's talk about standard operating procedures. And we've got, in terms of our time, about 10 minutes to have a little bit of our conversation here. And let's do it the way we've done before, which is we'll keep this open. Think about what are some of the things that are working in this front that we want to make mention of, and or areas of potential opportunities for growth. Thoughts and comments, please.
Well, this is Jenny, and I just want to poke the bear a little bit, and I want to ask Sheriff Carpinelli about his stance on the body cameras, because I have no understanding of that at all.
Jenny, why do you gotta refer to me as poke the bear?
I just want to hear you talk a little bit.
With that's about the body cameras you said?
Yeah.
Let me see. First, I'll give you the humorous answer because it'll make the legislators' eyes pop right out when I come with the cost of it. That's number one. Let me give you the second answer. It'll make the chairman's eyes pop right out when I come with the cost of it. And the third answer, the county manager will shake his head and go, how do we afford something like that? Yep. It is ridiculously expensive to keep the information afterwards and store it. And I wouldn't tax Connor right now with any more than what he's got going on today already. But I can tell you that it has to be monitored then by IT people. And there's a chain of custody, as Mark from the district attorney's office will back me up on that as well too, when it comes to the downloading of the cameras and stuff, and where that information is stored. So yeah, listen, the guys want them. If they had them, we'd get them if we could. But I can tell you right now, the county, we can't afford that. If we can find they say like a grant to buy them with, that sounds great. But once you've bought them, now you have to maintain them. And we've seen the cost a lot of things after we buy it with the maintenance is. And I hear it all the time about the radio system. The new radio system in our county we put in here. And wow,
so, Sheriff, are you saying like hundreds of thousands of dollars per year, or
No.
tens of thousands?
Yep.
Tens of thousands. Okay.
100,000. I mean,
Hundreds of thousands.
Yes. You look into it. That's why if it was that's all I'm gonna say. But yeah, listen. You want cameras? Great, have cameras. I mean, I'm all for it any more than if you can back up with what everybody does, for clarity. But I can tell you this though, when you ask about body cameras, what have you seen throughout all of the country in the last 2 years? With all the rioting and the police shootings that have gone on, every single time that they've shown the police footage, it didn't matter worth a damn to the people who burned, flipped over cars, threw rocks and bottles, and did the whole thing. They don't care.
Sheriff, let's not go there, because there were some pretty devastating other.
Joan, you muted yourself. Will somebody tell Joan she muted herself?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
I don't know if we want to go down that path, because I'm not going to agree that what was shown throughout the country was just, what you're intimating it was. There were some really devastating things that happened.
Are you censoring me?
So are the state police, I keep hearing that the state is like delaying their put of the state of the body cams for state police. Is that happening, Sheriff? Do we know that?
Yeah, they just put a thing into the governor. Let me see, I got it here someplace. He just made he just put up one of the things that he's going to try to do. It says full body worn the executive budget includes funding support recently passed legislation requiring all state police officers on patrol to wear body cameras. I think great. I mean, let's see what the cost of that's going to be and how they maintain it. I mean, you're talking a little over 3,000, 5,000 men and women that'll be wearing body cameras. So that's going to be quite a cost to the state. But Joan, back to you real quick. We have a conversation, can't we, or no?
Sheriff, we've lost your image. I don't know
Not
whether
here.
your camera's covered. Something we could see you before and now I can't. There we
Got
go.
me now? Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We're on a tight schedule here, so I don't think it's appropriate that we go down that path. That's a different discussion that I'd gladly have with you some other
Yeah,
time.
but no, Joan, the reason why I was tying that in is to show the correlation where you can use, I'm fine with the cameras, but I'm showing that most of the time though, when you use the cameras, it's only good for the actual agency and with the court process of that. It really doesn't do much good with the outside public and the advocacy groups that don't want to see what the footage really showed. That's all I'm saying, Joan. That's all.
Yeah, and I get it.
That's
And truthfully, let's look at Lewis County. Unless Mike Young or some other defense counsel or Mark Lemieux can tell us that there's consistently a lot of motions complaining about, what the police have said or things like that. I'm not so sure that we need the cameras either.
I would just jump up and say that I agree with you. I suspect that the benefit would not justify the cost in Lewis County. We just don't have, or at least I don't feel we have the violent situations that they that the use would justify the cost.
Okay.
What,
I'm just going to stop you just for a minute in terms of our time. We've got about 5 more minutes in this topic. We can continue to talk about body cams, or we could look at anything else around the standard operating procedures, whether it's material that we received around some of the current practices, or whether there's something else on this list that's on your screen that we want to look at in terms of an opportunity. If you want, you've got a few more minutes to talk about this one before we move further.
This is Jenny. I just wanted to inquire back to Matt and Mark. Earlier, you mentioned about youth development, and we all know how in youth we're using more and more restorative justice practices. Do you see any link there with from youth to adult, or any opportunity here based on your utterance of about youth development?
I think my thought process on youth development really started from the resource guide that was provided, which kind of laid out some thought processes on youth. Obviously, every criminal who's an adult was a youth at some time. And I think if we can curb some of those future behaviors when they're young, that would be a wise investment from the county. Obviously, that may or may not involve the sheriff's office. And the guide indicated the sheriff's office really wouldn't be involved in some of those activities. We do have SROs in schools, but that doesn't mean we couldn't do educational resources for them, as well as provide other outlets for the youth in the community. I think Matt can probably outline some of the changes in regard to probation now monitoring some of the youthful offenders in the county and adolescent offenders. If Matt wants to just touch base on that, since his office kind of takes the lead.
Not really sure what you're asking me to talk about, though. Sorry, Mark.
I think Jenny just clarified that you were asking in regard to the youth in our community committing crimes. And Matt, now that the ages have changed and you're responsible for some of the adolescent offenders and youthful offenders, how that can change with the standard operating procedures, or how we can assist police in those interactions. Is that right, Jenny?
Yeah, and no doubt, the Youth Bureau funds with the youth aid officer, part of it over at the sheriff's department. I mean, I think there's parts in there that we probably don't advertise or market well of things that are going on. So, but I was getting to the restorative justice. That seems like kind of low hanging fruit, because it's the talk of the day, right, Matt? Like we contract for restorative justices out of both departments a lot.
Right.
And Matt, I don't think we deal with that many adolescent offenders in this county, even dating back to when the law changed, I think back in 2019. Am I correct?
Correct. Yeah, I don't have any of that data in front of me right now, but the raise the age has not really had a lot of impact, knocking on wood here so far in our county.
I mean, would it be accurate if I said like literally a handful or less?
I believe so, yes.
I would say no more than 5 a year, and that's a lot.
Yeah, we haven't had any pins. I guess I was just kind of trying to harken back to when you two mentioned about youth development and how it maybe could fit back into these standard operating procedures.
Yeah, I think I was speaking youth development almost more as mental health and substance abuse, because we have a tremendous amount of 20, 21, 22-year-old individuals involved in criminal activity involving substance abuse, whether they're dealing drugs in this county to surrounding counties. And I think if we could have reached them at a much younger age, we could have potentially curbed some of that future behavior.
Yeah, that packet, some of the stuff I highlighted in that packet was, partnering with schools, adopt a school programs, or just programs where, you know, officers walk through the schools. I know we have some SROs, but not every school in our community does. You know, I'm thinking back to, I think Mark and I have had this conversation. You know, because of my job, my children see some officers and they're not afraid of officers, but some people in the community still look at officers with a negative impact or a negative connotation. So perhaps they're walking through an elementary, you know, monthly, weekly. I don't know. I don't know what it would work, but something as simple as that could just really bolster community involvement with law enforcement. And maybe that stuff already happens. I don't know.
Okay. Those are, and it's perfectly fine today that what we're doing is kind of gathering information and questions. I want to send this back to you, and when we get together next time, we can prioritize looking at this to say, is there something here that we want to capture as one of our potential opportunity areas? So that's good. Is there anything else on the front of the SOPs that you want to specifically talk about before we spend a few minutes on training?
I'd like to talk a little bit about hotspot policing, and if there's any data out there that shows how far away the closest car. I guess start with, are there hotspots in the county that are identified? Is there data that shows how far the closest car might be? Is there any way that, or is it necessary for us to sort of fine tune our hotspot policing, or is it as good as it can get now? I just wonder if there's any data out there that you could share, the sheriff could share, that would help us arrive at a decision along that line.
So, Larry, are you asking me about hotspot stuff, are you?
Yes.
So you're asking if we have any targeted so-called areas of where there's more trouble and things like that?
Yes.
Yes, we do.
Okay.
I'm not going to like it if I tell you where it is, though.
Well, that's neither here nor there whether I like it or not. I just wondering what our policy is. And
yeah, no, we do that all the time. You know, wherever there's a problem or a situation, that's just one of the things that we do in police work. You know, we target that area. Yep. But we don't do it in any way that's racially biased or discriminatory. Okay. Counselor.
That would be hard to do in Lewis County, I suppose.
Any other questions on that? All right.
So you're not going to be, there isn't any data to share, or that, you know, we could drill into with respect to how that program works.
I'd have to look. I'd have to look at that to tell you. I mean, it's like I say, it's not on. You know, we'll say it again. We're awful lucky in Lewis County so far as to the way the crime is in this area. We are. So it's not all, you know, on an everyday basis. But when we do have our hotspots pop up, we take care of them. I can try to find some data for you. I'll look and see if we can have to compare to that.
Sheriff, would the records show like the town where the person was arrested, or is it based on something else?
Yes, we have. Yeah, we have that. That's why I was.
Yeah, so that you know doesn't have to be your particular, spots that you concentrate on, because that's something that law enforcement has to keep to itself. but in terms of data about towns, you know, number of arrests for certain kinds of activities in certain towns, without giving away, you know, any more detail or location than that, I would think would be a stat that I think, Larry, maybe that would answer some of your interest.
Right, Joan, we could do that, but I won't do it on this form here, being that it is publicly televised later on.
Yeah, understood. Understood.
Okay.
Okay. So we have a choice to make here. We could spend a few minutes on training before we do a hard stop in less than 10 minutes, or we can leave it at there and start with training in our next session. Just a quick round. Do you want to keep going and talk about training and keep this ball going, or shall we leave that one as our starting point for the next meeting? Any thoughts? You want to spend a couple of minutes on training now as a starting point, or will we leave it until next time?
My thought is to leave it till next time. As Jenny says, we poked the bear enough today.
Anybody else? Are you, Larry's suggestion or recommendation is that we've had, I'll say this a different way, Larry. We've had a good and productive session, and that we start our next discussion looking at the notes that we've had, but then starting with training and whether or not there's some potential there for us in our next conversation. Is
That works for
anybody,
me.
is that okay?
Yes.
Sounds good to me.
Okay, okay. Any objections to that?
No.
Okay, all right. So here's what I'd like us to do in this next 5 minutes or so. I'd like us to just talk about our expectations for our next session and my understanding about where we're going. So let me just revisit. I'm going to come back here for a minute. We had 3 focus areas that we want to talk about in terms of what are our strengths and our opportunities for growth. And what we are wanting to identify is what are some of those potential areas for growth. Today in our conversation, people have talked about those things in general and specific ways. I've, out of your conversation, have taken the best notes that I can, except for the 10 minutes when I had no internet. And unfortunately, that's when I missed what Jenny, what you had been talking about around mental health and some of the partnerships. So maybe that one, to figure out a way, Jenny, to hear what I missed in that time. My sincere apologies for my technology. So what I've got is a set of notes that I'd like to send you. They will be rough notes, not for distribution, but only for our group's discussion and our starting off point for next time. Because just as a reminder, where we're trying to get to is that we want to look at and make sure that the opportunities we are presenting are what's going to be in our best interest in terms of even furthering, because what I'm hearing is there's lots of things going right, and we're going to use this as an opportunity to grow further. And so what else can we do in terms of our recommendations about furthering community engagement, promoting public safety, and fostering further trust through some transparency that we can generate in our next meeting? And part of that is, as Ryan had pointed out to us, we need to identify some metrics of success. So in our next conversation, we want to talk about what you've seen and what are the priorities from the 2 areas we've covered. And we also want to address training, carrying out that same conversation in the first part of our discussion, and then moving into what are we going to do with that one, as well as what will be the measures, how will we notice any improvement or shifts. Have I got that right, folks? Fair? Reasonable? Okay. So if it's in terms of our timing, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen so we can come back and see the group. What our obligation is that over the course of the next couple of weeks, I think we need to have that next meeting, because in the course of the month of March, we have to have this ready. So that means public feedback in whatever forms. This group needs to decide that next time as well. whatever forms needs to have a couple of weeks to happen. So my suggestion is that we schedule a meeting at everyone's earliest convenience, even if it could be next week. I don't know whether that works for folks, to carry out the rest of this conversation, make decisions about what are our key recommendations, and then who in the public can help make sure that we've stayed true or we can answer any questions so that we can have a final meeting and have this ready, say, by the end of February so that it can go to March to the Board of Legislators. Ryan, am I on track in terms of timing?
You are right on track. You got it.
Okay. So in terms of the logistics of finding a space for 12 of us to all have the same calendar time, I don't know whether we can do that on this call, or whether, Ryan, you have a suggestion. Do you want to do it by a doodle poll? I don't know what works for this group.
I think the doodle poll has worked quite well, or this time we got fortunate because we kind of narrowed it down, and it would have been bad if more people had said they couldn't make it, but it worked out. So
Okay.
we'll try it again. But I'm thinking maybe 2 weeks this time instead of a month, because
yeah, it needs to be much sooner. From my perspective, it could be next week. Does anybody have any objections to that? You've all got a lot that goes on in your head, and it's easier if we don't have a lot of time in between. So if we send you out some dates for next week, is that reasonable for folks? Okay, yeah. I'm seeing enough nods in there to say that's what we're going to target. So we'll work behind the scenes to get you that doodle poll, and we'll get it to you as quick as we can. And if you can turn it around when you look at it, that would be awesome. And I will do the same with these notes, knowing that they're Christie's chicken scratch. There's no gospel in them. They're just what I captured from it, and we can correct and adjust as we need to when we start up our next session. Is that fair?
Yes.
All right.
Once around the room is, so I asked you how you were coming into this meeting, and then I'd love to know how you're leaving. One word to describe how you're leaving.
Okay, well, I'll start. I guess I'm feeling encouraged.
Okay.
And I can do the roll call here.
Thank you.
Pat?
Pleased.
Matt?
I would say encouraged as well.
Mark?
Informed.
Joan?
Dialogue.
Jenny?
Thoughtful.
Larry?
I hope for a positive outcome, and I think we're working towards that.
Jerry?
Yep, enjoyed being part of the group and participating, and I think we're making progress.
Sheriff?
I'm smiling.
Tom?
Very good meeting.
And Mike?
Interesting.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for the information, Sheriff Carpinelli, that you and your group pulled together. Ryan, thank you for making it possible for us to all get that. And thank you, all of you, for reading it in such short order and contributing to days in ways that really honor the professionals that you all are. I look forward to talking with you next week. All the best, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.